Such hearty scoring, Gemnox. It's. I really feel that this is a wonderful, spirited interpretation. I'm not so sure that it is strictly classical or neoclassical, but I think that it really captures a lot of the kind of Beethoven spirit of adventuresome, just kind of devil-may-care brilliance. And there are some things where in the score where you make it a little more difficult on yourself than you need to, and I think that you may be holding back a little bit, and kind of maybe over interpreting the transcription, right, rather than making things a little easier on the players. All right, but all that said, I really love this, and considering how many different directions we have gone over the past 4 of these movement 2 evaluations, I feel that this is such a great way of coming back to the center. Do you know what I mean? I feel that your orchestration here is very centered, and and just really is kind of putting us back on track with a more I don't know, traditional approach, but more kind of more Beethoven oriented approach. So, just starting from the very beginning, you know, you've got horns in F, trumpets in B flat, and you know, you are pretty much just scoring, you know, a chromatic array of pitches for these instruments, right? You know, just to kind of look ahead here, you know, that's all. I mean, some of these could be played on natural trumpets and horns. Some of these couldn't, right? Like that, like for the some things can be corrected by the player's lip, but after a while, it just gets to be kind of ridiculous, right? It's really better to stay with open pitches on natural trumpets. But yes, you know, and some of this could be played stopped on natural horn. But I mean, why, right? I think that your scoring is pretty much more for just, you know, just for standard chromatic horns, modern horns, and that's fine. So let's start at the very beginning, and I just want to say this is a very sensible tempo, 125. I it's you know, it's not exactly the allegro vivace of the piano score, but there's no reason why it has to be. The one thing that I would comment on is that you should probably, like, I would go for a slightly slower first movement, right? I looked at both of your submissions. You actually submitted the first movement and the second movement together, and it was, you gave me the choice of which one to do, but you said you had a preference for the second movement. So I decided to go with the second movement, just because we needed more of those on the first instance. The second instance was, I feel that you did even better on this one than the first one, and then you know, and then just the third reason why was just, you know, because just overall I thought it fit the arc of all of the evaluations in order, right? In the order that I received them. Okay, so just a few quick comments. One is that you have like little, you know, slightly uneven slurring and schemes and so on between your winds and strings. Sometimes that's fine. Sometimes it sort of distracts from what you're trying to do. You are never ever going to need to mark the bowings on these, right? That is for the concertmaster to decide, and I'm sure that they would probably decide along the lines that you have indicated here. But you know, they might mark this at the beginning and then never again, right? Because the players are good enough to know that that's what's expected. And in fact, they don't even need that probably in most cases, right? So you do not need to mark any bowing marks ever, right? Just don't even bother unless you are the concertmaster or the principal player and you're doing it in pencil, or you're, you know, or some other reason, or maybe you're preparing a set of parts to be sent out to be played in shows, right? Like where there's like one rehearsal, two rehearsals, no practice time for the players. They just sit down and they play it, right? That would be where you would need to put in the bowing marks in advance. Otherwise, just leave them out. All right? Okay. So now let's jump back to the beginning, and we're going to completely play this exactly by the rules that I've set. We're going to look at double A and double B. And yeah, better to use the double A rather than the single A, right? So this is actually double A, according to the evaluation criteria and the templates that I issued. And the we'll be looking at double A and double B, and then we'll be going back and then looking at each of the sections that that recapitulates, right? Because this is a rondo. Okay, so so starting from here, so shifts of dynamic and registers, do they imply contrast of texture? And you've decided to not go with that and just interpret everything in just strings at the beginning. And you know, I mean, that's fair enough. It you know, it might be a decision that Beethoven might have made in a similar situation. Okay, but I really like the fact that you go to the winds, and here I feel that the difference in bowing is justifiable because you want to get this. You're trying to get this really smooth, da, and then here, dun dun, right? So I completely understand that. I think it's just easier to go slur and then dun dun, like make these just individual staccatos or mezzo staccato, right? But like re-articulate here. It's just easier to read, and it's essentially the same thing. This is what kind of caught my eye as being a little weird. The slurring of the bassoons, and then then as compared to the double basses and so on. And then here, like you've got this die tie 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 tie. How about what if it went die tie I tie I tie I tie I? Like what if you had a slur per beam group? Because there's certainly no need, like this whole da 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 da, that is like a technical thing for the fingers of the pianist, right? And it doesn't quite translate to strings and winds the way that you might think, right? It's in fact like there's a tendency to add a sort of an inflection here, where it's a little firmer at the beginning of the slur, and then it sort of flicks off the end of the slur, almost like a staccato. And then that can affect the timing a little bit. And then you put a bunch of these in a row, and then it can get to be kind of gallopy sounding, right? So I feel that you want this to be really, really even and driving. So I think it would be better for you to have no slurs, or to have like slur per beam group, slur once on each beat, right? And that's just much, much easier on the player. Okay. And so I had a marking, meno a tempo right here, and I think that like in terms of the beginning of the piece, da da da. Dun, 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 dun. I think that this would be the only time I would recommend that in the way that you orchestrated it. Okay, I think that some other orchestrations, like the one that I did and several others that we've looked at already, I think that that's kind of the way to go, is to have just pull back slightly on the tempo here, and then right back into the to whatever the tempo is. Now here you don't have that driving of a tempo, and you could have actually gone a lot faster than this if you fix some of the slurring and everything else. Like I'll have some other suggestions and so on. But yeah, and then this da 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 da. I mean, if you really want that kind of smooth thing, and here with the bassoons, I would slur once per bar rather than over 2 bars, right? And then in some situations like this, I would just have this ta ta, right? Just like the double basses, just bowing once per note, right, on these quarter notes. Because I think that this smoothness can end up being very, very pasty, and then like you have some things that are a little weird to slur over. They're not impossible, but they're just, the player might end up cheating a little bit and like breaking the slur right here anyways, and then playing each of these separately. So if that's the case, then I would just say slur this slur this bar, slur this bar, slur this bar, no slurs, same thing, no slurs. All right, so our question when we get to here, and by the way, I really like this, this pianissimo. Dun, 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 dun. Okay, look, if you're going to get to forte here, shouldn't you get to forte by here? Right? It's just kind of strange because you would even hear it in the mock-up. By the time the players got to here in your mock-up, they were mezzo piano, and your strings were almost forte, right? So this doesn't work, right? If you're going to go crescendo to forte by here, go crescendo to forte by the end of this bar, and then it's set, and then they'll just be forte for the rest, and it'll join up. But like the way that you've scored it this way, that this will end up being very, very understated in the middle, and that's not what you want, right? You want everything to crescendo like this, forte by the beginning of the next bar, right? So just have your crescendo stop at the end of the bar with a forte, right? Okay. Yeah, so that's an instance of what I'm talking about. You're making things harder on yourself than you need to. Yeah, and then, this little stack right in here, the flutes and oboes over the violins, Yeah, and then clarinets and violas and cellos and so on. All right. So the question here is this smooth rather than awkward? Is there textural and dynamic expansion? Do you maintain the sense of nervous energy? Right. So I think that if you slur this the way I'm suggesting, or get rid of the slurs entirely, then you will maintain the nervous energy. Right. In fact, if you listen to the way that a lot of pianists play this section right in here, they don't go die 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 die. They'll actually go doodly. They'll just be going so fast that they're not paying attention at all to the distinction here, right? And if they're not, then why are you, right? So yeah. Textural and dynamic expansion, I would say, I mean, you do all of that right here, right? By pushing forwards and stacking all these and then going into this, like this. So you really do keep things very much, like you expand to your maximum range immediately, right? And then this is interesting that you pull back to piano, right? So I think that is very, very cool. Like you give us a little bit of variation, a little bit of dynamic variation, which affects the timbre, right? And you take out the clarinets. I think that's all very, very cool. Yeah, and then you have another push forwards. Like with these crescendos, if you say piano crescendo, you don't even need the dashed line. And you could just put in, like, I would say, like, 2 bars is short enough for you to put in a hairpin. Like, all of these dashed lines could just be hairpins. And maybe this one you could just say crescendo here and then forte crescendo. It's weird. Forte crescendo to piano? What does this mean? Forte piano? Like you've got here? Does it mean piano subito? I don't understand. So yeah. So anyways, there's a bit of work that you need to do. This is not ready for the stands. You've got to do some a bit of touching up. But it doesn't mean that it couldn't be played. I think it would be really exciting to hear this read. Get rid of these slurs. You don't need them. Okay. So, do you end the phrase with finality? Framing the next part? You sort of do, right? You sort of set everything up, right? And then here, like with the way that you push into these next sections and the way that you set up the drama here, you also don't need the little pauses that I recommend in some scores, right? Just because of the way that you connect things, right? So you don't need any of those pauses that I mentioned in any of the other evaluations, which I hope you're taking a look at. I think everybody would really appreciate your opinion in their efforts, just as they're going to give you their feedback on your effort. So yeah, so some of the questions that I have in this section: direct transcriptions might prove impractical, especially without transposing to a more negotiable key signature. That's not an issue. You're in F. Does interlocking/interdependent scoring between orchestral sections support headlong momentum, but with precision and clarity? You kind of don't do that. You keep all of the you keep that all in the first violins. And then you do a little bit of going back and forth, but it all stays in the string section. Right. And then you lead back into the other sections very dramatically. And I think it's nice the way that you stack and you get bigger and you get bigger and you get bigger. Now, one thing that I think is interesting here is that you have like no brass at all, right? Until you get to right here. Could you possibly bring the horns in a little earlier? Like maybe this opening could be brass plus strings, like kind of behind the strings. So like say mezzo forte brass, and then just strings. Ba da da like maybe trumpets on top and horns in the middle, and then all strings. Dun, 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 dun. Just a nice way to kind of work them in, so that they have a little bit of a warm up, right? Kind of in a harmless way, very, very covered by the strings, and then when they start to come through here a little bit, right? They're a little bit warmed up. All right. Then you have all this pizzicato and so on, and then these little plick, pluck, dinny. And I think this is, at 126, this is all okay. I would still go dun die dun die dun die dun die. So in other words, give this, you got this D sharp here. I would almost like maybe throw in a D sharp here or down here, and then go dun da da. Right. Just try to keep this rest approach to just like a couple of bars. I mean, 3 is not so bad, but keep in mind that you're bringing in these players they have not joined into this, so they're just kind of their participation might feel a little lackluster compared to the first violins, right? Like having a little less drive, just because you kept them out of the action so much. Yeah, and I think that these could just be slurred by beam group, right? Rather than this ta 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 ta. I just think that that's, it's just a little fiddly. Do you know what I mean? Yes, these are fiddles, but I mean, it's fiddlier than fiddle music. Yeah, and this is all cool. All right, and then we get to this part right here. So this is the place at which I want us to start looking across at all of the iterations of the same sections, right? So we saw that this was all scored in strings, da 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 da, and so on, right? And then we had this little da 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 da. Right, and then that sets up this, right? So we're just going to look at all of these opening bits, these like 12, it's like 12 bars or 11 bars, 12 bars, 11 bars. Yeah. All right, so here we see that da da. So I think that like this da. I think that this is the statement ta ta. So everybody in the whole cotton picking orchestra should go ta ta. Like why have just the strings articulating the downbeat here, and the winds and the brass just going across the bar line, right? Why can't everybody just go boom right on the downbeat? Ta ta. Right? So you have a nice well articulated downbeat here. Why can't you have one here? Right? Just have everybody do it the same way. Okay, so here you've got this sort of stretched out a bit. And hang on. My stupid other screen. You've got this all set up here, and I like the gap right here and how you fill it with the clarinets. That's kind of fun. It's not that the problem, of course, here is that these second violins and violas are just going to get swallowed up by what the horns and first bassoon are doing, right? So, like, if you really want to bring out the string tone, there's 2 ways to do it. One is just to play octaves, right? Da da. Just like with maybe the very top notes, like get rid of this F right in here, and just have the top line, and have that an octave lower in the seconds, and then have the violas double what's going on in the seconds, and then you will get a very, very nice clear string tone that will absorb the sound of the other winds into it, so that it has a so that it sounds like the strings there's more string tone in there than there really is. Now, here you are enclosing the second flute between the first and second oboe, and it is basically just kind of non-functional the way that you've got it scored here, right? It would be better for you to go a due at the top, right, and then have the first oboe play the second flute part, right? And that would be a balanced way of scoring this. Of course, you just end up sacrificing the mixture of timbres of the that you would normally get, like with the oboe plus the flute. So if you really want that, then here's a crazy idea. What if you were to have a due flutes on top, joined by first oboe, and then had your second oboe play this line right in here, and that because like this part right here is the same as the first clarinet, right? And the first clarinet doesn't need any help, right? But just really, I think we talked about. Did we talk about this in your last entry to this? Your tendency to stick the second flute, to enclose the second flute between the oboes, or to just put it way below where it had any kind of, contribution to the sound. Because like here, you do it again, right? It would be better. It would be better to just swap these parts, or to have this lower line and this lower line in oboes, and then have a due flutes on top, right? But I understand you want this mixture of oboe and flute color on top. So the answer to that is don't score this in second flute. It's just not doing anything for the second flute. Unless everybody was playing pianissimo, you just are not going to hear this in there. I don't care what the mock-up says. So if you want this line to be efficacious, to use a fancy word, give it to your first clarinet, and don't even bother with the second flute scoring. You see what I mean? Okay, so you've been around the block with these evaluations plenty, okay? So you've got to stop doing it. All right, you got to stop doing it, because I'm going to keep calling you on it, right? Because like otherwise, what great scoring, but why are you still doing this, right? Isn't that a thing of the past? Stop scoring second flute so low. Go watch my Stop Burying Your Flutes video, right? I don't know, you might have commented under there. I know like there were a few people from this same challenge who said, "Oh no, Thomas is going to call me on this." So if you've already commented on that, then yeah. Anyways, I won't go on and on about it, but I'll point it out when it happens again, all right? But like all of these textures are definitely fixable, but just like give this to the clarinet, or just reshuffle the pitches or whatever, right? Anyways, so we really took a sidetrack there. We are comparing how this part was scored from the beginning. Now, how is it here, right? We have this nice tutti, and then you have the little answer in just bassoons and wind and flute and clarinet, right? And then like the same essential lineup here. Da da da. Okay, and once again, your flutes are just so low here, right? And you are doubling. Like this is the opposite of what you should be doing here. It should be a due flutes and oboes in thirds, right? Because like the second flute here is just what's it doing, right? You already have those pitches covered here by the first clarinet anyways, right? Yeah. And then the strings here have got a lot to compete with. The middle strings have got a lot to compete with the horns and trumpets and so on, right? And the trumpets sitting right on top of the flutes, right? You're not going to hear a single thing from the flutes. So really, like, it would be better for you to go a due, doubling the top note here of the violins, and then have have this same line, this top line here, doubled by the second violins, right? And maybe even by the violas, and then just let the winds and the brass take the middle voices. All right, dun 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 dun. See, like this is even better. Second flute doubling first oboe, right? That's better. That is so much better than before. But I mean, when you consider that you also have clarinet on the second oboe line, I mean, I guess it's all fine. Yeah, it's nicely integrated, right? And then here, like we have like a reversal instead of the winds responding to what the strings did. Now here you're having the strings respond to what the winds did. That's very cool. Da da. Shouldn't this be like just a half note? And if you want these two separately articulated notes, write it as portato or mezzo staccato, right? So like either a tenuto mark on each note or staccato on each note, right? Like this right here, but without the up bows. And then you're just back to like the same configuration. Dun 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 dun. Right. Okay. So all good. Just yeah. It's just pretty much like a copy of this. Right. All right. So we will compare the other sections as we go. Now let's jump ahead to double E. All right. And double E is scored with the left hand sitting in the treble staff range, and the right hand playing like kind of octave chords above it. And yeah, so like once again, like here you've got second flute doubling oboe, and I mean that's a better idea than this here, right? With the flutes enclosing the oboes, right? That's like, it would be better for you just to shuffle all this around and have the flutes take the upper two pitches and the oboes take the lower two pitches, right? It just works way better. Yeah, and then here, da da dum, better in octaves if you're going to have this much weight in your winds and brass. But I mean, that's not to say that things aren't scored in a cool way. And then bassoons and lower strings. Bum 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 bum. Da da da. Bum 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 bum. Da. Yeah, ta ta, not ta. Yeah, especially not with repeated notes. Try not to slur over repeated notes. Yeah. Unless you've got like you're making it intentionally portato or mezzo staccato. Yeah, so just do this. Slur, then articulate the downbeat. All right, same thing here. Yeah, and this is really similar to before. Pianist mode. Da, strings answering. Dun, 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 dun. All right, and we'll look at all this in a minute. All right, so now let's jump ahead to bar 150. All right, and this is really similar to what we had before. There's a few little differences. Dun, dun, and I would just reverse a lot of stuff in here. This is fine. See, like, why isn't there more scoring like this for flutes and oboes? Yeah, so the mock-up is fooling you. The mock-up is saying, hey, you can hear a second flute way down there thrown in with a bunch of other things, but you can't. Okay, that's not real. All right, so stop doing that. That's your lesson for this one. That's like, okay, I won't harp on it, but yeah, just learn this lesson, because it makes me want to do more of these challenges just to fix some of these problems. Just to know the next time my orchestrators take a crack at something, they're not going to revisit that same problem. This is cool right in here. Yeah. Dun, 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 dun. Very similar to the third time. Yeah, and then same thing. Ba da da, bum 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 bum, and so on. All right, so now let's jump back and look at the that part that I said, hey, smooth rather than awkward, right? And we saw how you dealt with this. Like first you had like crescendo to forte, and this and so on. Yeah, and then this, which I was suggesting that you slur by the beam group. And here I was like shorten these slurs and so on, and make the bass a little more emphatic, and then here you repeated it, kind of repeated it more or less the same thing, with at a softer dynamic. All right, that's all great. So now let's compare to how you did that at bar 43. All right, and we can see it's pretty much, it's very, very similar, right? I'm going to go back up again and, yeah, right. Yeah, so you have a few things coming and going. I like the horns coming in here, and and the way that you have like a long, slow crescendo. But really, try once again. Try not to do this crescendo across empty bars. Don't do that ever. Okay, crescendo to however loud you think this is going to be, and then start off on however loud you think this is, and so on. All right. So yeah. So maybe crescendo to mezzo forte here, right? And then here, crescendo to I don't know, piano or something. Like you're kind of starting your crescendo in your winds 2 bars before the crescendo in the strings. And why not just cut this? Just cut that crescendo and start it here at say mezzo forte. All right? Don't do this where you've got different things, especially winds getting louder than your strings. Try not to do that in situations because the winds are already louder than the strings. Okay? All right. So yeah, but pretty much like a lot of the organization is the same, except like here you're really pushing forwards to this nice loud, Yeah, and I like this. Yeah, that's very, very cool. Yeah, and just think how effective this would be if these were all like no slurs. Like like especially just everything just like no slurs here at the end. Right? Just really hammering on these notes. Yeah, and just Right. It's just like why is this not slurred and this is slurred? Just get rid of the slurs here. And the same thing here. All right. Then jump ahead to bar 100. And then, we see that's very similar to before, the especially the second iteration and pushing forward. Here you've worked it out. Piano, crescendo to mezzo forte, and so on. Right? So that's way better. Yeah, you're not gapping with your crescendo. Yeah, that works a lot better. Yeah, I'm not sure why your second horn is higher than your first horn. Swap these. Yeah, try not to do that. Unless you have a really damn good reason. I don't see the reason for it here. Yeah, and just like lose the slurs here, and then I think you just have this wonderful hammering effect. We have a few too many slur marks here, and then and just like get rid of the slurs here, there, and there. Okay. All right, but yeah, just as far as the scoring is much better here. Yeah. Alrighty. So now let's jump back to the double B section. Okay, and this is like one of the most interesting things is like how do you deal with this little flight of fancy by Beethoven? It's what I love so much about this piece is how much of a callback it is to his early days. There's a sort of a youthful brilliance to it, and it makes me wonder whether or not this was was something that he actually did in concert back when he was a young man in Vienna, when he was in his late teens, early 20s, and he used to kind of pay his way, I guess mid 20s, he used to pay his way by just having like improvisation concerts, kind of like Second City, except for just musically, and just he'd take any theme and he would play it, and then he would do all these crazy things with it. And I'm not saying that this exact piece is what he did back then, but I'm saying that like there might be elements from it that he remembered doing, and he thought, okay, well, I'm going to work that into one of my own themes, right? Yeah, and that's just what it really feels like here. All right, so with this one we had the pizzicato, kind of supporting and then getting more and more intense and then pushing into the next thing, right? A little crazy. Now, just one little comment here. I totally don't see why this isn't in the second violin part, right? Because like, look what you're asking the first violinist to do. Like you're really concerned about how they're bowing, but you're not really concerned about how they have to suddenly change their position here. Da ba da da. Right? Wouldn't it be easier just to have this in the second violins, and then they can just play this B again, right, where it's sitting next to them, and then these guys can just come in right on the downbeat without having to worry about this, right? Just try to make it easier on the players, especially in a situation where they're never going to get enough practice time, right? Especially with a piece like this that is so technical. So yeah, just try to make things easier on the players. All right, so now let's jump ahead to 51. So this is where you're kind of climbing down, and so on. Right? And when we see here, like I actually like this. This is very cool. You have your seconds. It could be firsts. It wouldn't make any difference. So and then you have your violas coming in an octave lower, and then you have like your lower strings coming in an octave lower even than that. So you have this quadruple octave working its way down. And then this was very, very cool. It's kind of like holding this. But I'm not so convinced by this diminuendo here and this crescendo to forte. But it is something that like, obviously going straight into the next section is what works better here rather than having any kind of pausa. Once again, I don't think there's any need to in the way that you approach this score. Yeah, and you know what? I think you take away all the surprise by going crescendo here, right? Now, maybe you don't want the surprise, that's fine. But I mean, what really punches the listener in the face is pow. Like pow, right? So if you're going crescendo into this, then it goes against the grain of the terrace dynamics, right? Like fortissimo, piano, fortissimo, piano. There's no need for a mezzo piano here. Okay, so just like same thing, just stick with a piano, get rid of this crescendo, but leave in the held note. I think that's really, really great. And then here, make the fortissimo, either just get rid of this note, right, or start the fortissimo there. I think everything should go bam on that downbeat. Maybe just get rid of these notes. They're completely not needed. All right. Yep. Yeah, and this is strange. Like, this is a D, and that is an E. And that's a D. Right? So I think you messed up there. I think you intended this to be a D. All right, so let's jump ahead to bar 74. And so on, yeah. So that's all. Yeah, and then you've got these little pizzicatos and so on. Yeah, so it's really very much the same. You tend to give your second violinists a lot of things to do. Keep in mind that like there's a reason why the first violins get a lot of the necessary stuff, and it's not, it's not because the orchestrators don't know what else to do. It's because of their responsibility of leadership, right? So if you're giving the second violins a lot to do all the time that take leadership positions, it weakens the string section, right? But the occasional thing is great. Doing it all the time gets people suspicious about whether or not like you have a special friend in the second violins. Sort of like how Dvorak like wrote all of these incredible second flute lines, making people suspicious whether or not he was in love with his second flute player. All right. So yeah, so this all works fine. Yeah. Now here, like in this that's more of a first violin kind of a thing, right? I almost feel like a lot of this could have been done like Divisi. Do you know what I mean? Like with the lower player going da 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 da, and the top player going da 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 da. I think you get much more precise and much more headlong momentum. And then especially when you got to this part right here, you could have the lower players going da 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 da, and then here you could have the upper player going dun da da dun. Right? It just makes a lot more sense. Right, and and it's just a bit more bars than I'm just a little uncomfortable with this whole thing of just swapping around the rest data rest data rest data. You know what I mean? If there's some way of making it a little bit more regular for the players, maybe that takes away your element of surprise. I don't know, but this is kind of cool. And see, this is so much better positioned. Da 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 dun. Right? As opposed to da da boop, right? Okay, and this is all really fun right in here with the little help from the flutes and oboes, and it's just a quite a few bars in a row of rest data, rest data, rest data, rest data. Did you watch my my pitfalls video? Because this is falling right into the pitfalls. I think it would be better for you to if you had the downbeat as part of this, right? Ta ta da, ta ta da, ta ta da, right? I think that just works a lot better than just having so many bars in a row of rest data, rest data, rest data. All right, it's just in terms of this absolute dead-on precision that you need in order to pull off the very flighty, virtuosic feeling of this, right? Everything else I kind of don't have a problem with. All right, so now let's jump ahead to 110, and this is where you're kind of working your way down, and so on. So yeah, so this is very cool, and I really love the way everything kind of stacks up here. And then you have the octave, or not octave. You have the kind of pedal note in the violas here. Yeah, and I think that works. That's all you need, right? Yeah, and then sudden surprise. Boom. Yeah, you don't even need these notes here at all. Okay. All right, so now let's jump ahead to bar 133. All right, and this is the last. And yeah, and once again, you've just decided to keep it in the strings. Okay, that's all fine. And then, but even with first violins, I would make this Divisi and just have the lower Divisi players going da 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 da, and so on, and have the top players going da 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 da, right, and just getting that absolute dead on, that absolute dead on da 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 da. Yeah, and then see and same thing here. Dun, da, da, da. I would have this B played right on the downbeat. Dun, da, da, and then maybe even the G da da. Yeah, and then so just you have so many bars in a row here, Gemnox. You're falling right into my pitfall, right? So I would definitely provide on beat, just going da 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 da, on the beat. That's fine, but rest da da rest da da rest da da rest da. I think it's better to go ta 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 ta. Go back and watch my pitfalls video. Redo this, and then I think you could get it ready for the stance. Yeah, that's very cool though. Pluck, pluck, pluck. That's all really nice. Yeah, and I think that this leads forward really great. I think that this should crescendo too, right? And so should the double basses. Okay. All right, so now Speaking of those, let's jump back to bar 57 and let's check out the boom. Okay, so here we've got you got these slurs, and here I think that they're fine. This die 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 die. I think that that works really good in the strings, the way that it's scored. Okay, and especially in D major, right? It's just such an easy key for violins. Yeah, and then bum 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 bum. Yeah. Yeah, no need for up bow marks. Yeah, and then this is just kind of like copy paste. I would not be scoring oboe so high here because you're taking away from like the upward thrust of the inside of the voice and putting it on top, right? And that takes away the upward thrusting curve of the upper line, right? So yeah. Yeah, but everything else I think works great. Yeah. The other thing too is by doing this toot 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 up really really high, it takes away from the kind of nervous bubbling energy kind of thing because you're sort of keeping everything expanded, right? As opposed to, let's say you got rid of this and changed the part around a little bit, and then you drop like you basically had the highest pitches that we'll hear are just like these clarinets here, right? Just think, imagine it then, right? Boom, and then gradually stack these chords, right, until we get to right around here, rather than just having it stacked all the way through, right? Because I just feel like you're kind of undercutting the sense of drama here, right? That's all aesthetics. You can take it or leave it. Yeah. Yeah, I almost feel like there are some easier ways of scoring this. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, but anyway, like you could have your second violins going da 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 da. You could have your first violins going dun da da dun da da dun da da dun da da. You know what I mean? Just a little easier on the players. Just like I mentioned before. Not here. This is all fine. Right, and then you just write a duet here. You don't have to have double. You don't have to have split staves in two voices. Yeah. Yeah, especially if you're going to end like this, then I don't think that you should be filling it in. I don't think you should be filling these in. Just like gradually build up as it follows the curve of the strings as they rise, And then here, maybe this is a good place to just kind of get rid of maybe from right here or from right here, just get rid of the slurs, right? So da 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 da, as opposed to die 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 bug. Do you know what I mean? Right? So yeah, just maybe ease up on so many slurs once you get towards it, so that way you can have a real driving rhythm. Okay. All right, so now let's look at the sister section to this, 116. All right, in F. And same exact comments. You score it pretty similar. I like this. Bum, ba bum. So cool. Yeah, just that. And then I think there's no need to slur here at all. Did that happen the first time? Yeah, there's no need to slur these. All right. Yeah, and then the same thing here. Just cut the slurs and cut these slurs. Just really have it driving. Right, and then this can be slurred, right? Okay. But a lot of your structure is really good. Okay, so now we've looked at pretty much everything now. So there's like nothing left but the coda. Bum ba da dun dun dun. Dun 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 dun. Bum ba da dun dun dun. I think this is scored really beautifully. And then like adding the oboe on top. Dun 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 dun. Bum ba da dun dun dun. It's interesting. You have you've got tie marks where you need slurs in your second voice here. Okay. Don't worry about the tie being above like this and the slur being below like this, like slurring from stem end to stem end. That actually makes things clearer. However, here I kind of approve of you tying across the bar line. I think that's a really cool idea. Da 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 da. I think that's a really neat idea. Bum ba da da bum bum. Yeah, I would rather see octaves here in the strings, and then going to this right in here, the divisi and so on, with a clarinet, with these pitches covered by second clarinet, bassoon, and so on and so forth. Maybe oboe or something, rather than these triple stops and so on. The players have got enough to do already without having to worry about setting this up. Okay, especially in a situation where it's going to be a sight read, sight read, 2 rehearsals, and then the performance. Okay. Yeah, and then mark everybody sforzando on beat 2.5. Right, and then here I would just see the slurring pattern you've got here. Do this to your lower strings and put a sforzando on the middle beat. Yeah. Other than that, I really like this. And same thing here. Slur to beat 2, and then 2.5 should be a sforzando with no slur. And that way that you get a much punchier articulation, right? Yeah. And this is cool. Clarinet and oboe doubling first violin. Yeah, and this is very cool, the harmony over the top. Yeah, just such great ideas here, Gemnox. And it's sforzando pianissimo. And then here you get to your C7th chord. Why not keep going? Da da. Right? Because I feel like you don't quite go far enough here. Okay. About the only objection that I would have here is you start off high and you stay high and you stay high and you stay high and then you're high, right? Wow, you're high, Gemnox. No, but I mean you stay high, right? So like we're taking away, like what does Beethoven do? He goes, like he has a gradual rise in frantic, kind of frantic motion going upwards, right? Till he reaches really, really, really high. So why can't everybody else do that, right? I just feel that like the way that it kind of, despite the fact that it might seem exciting to have this spread so far, I feel that there's a kind of a static sense of structure here. I think there's something very dynamic about rising in pitch, right? I think everybody could be contributing to that in some way. All right. And then you have this big, massive tutti F here at the end, and that's cool. That's all right. Yeah. I think that if you're going to have all your strings down like this, then the general pitches of everything should be down a bit further than they are, right? Maybe a duet flutes here, octaves are fine here for your oboes, and then I'll do a B flat clarinets an octave on this lower octave, right? I think that at very least I would do that if you're going to have your first violin so low. The way that you got your winds and brass scored, I would actually have I would just take everything in your upper strings up an octave, right? Anyway, so yeah, so I mean, there's some really great stuff in this. It's such an exciting score, and it has so much life and pizzazz, and yeah, it is definitely one of those scores that improves my mood to look at, right? Not to say that anybody was bringing it down, but it's just has so much fun and fury and fascination in it. So really great work, Gemnox. And once again, I wish I could be saying, "Wow, I'd love to see what you do in the next challenge," but I cannot guarantee that there will be another one. All I can say is that everybody out there, you know what to do. Give Gemnox your best advice on their score. Plaudits and creative feedback and like supportive thoughts and so on. And Gemnox, if you have stayed away from looking at these, or maybe you just found out about it that I had come back and started doing these, then please, your feedback on other people's entries would be really, really valued by me. So thanks everybody, and hold tight because there is yet another one of these entries coming in maybe about an hour. Okay, so hold on for that. This is really exciting to have two in one day, and I will see you for the next one.